Thank you so much, Mandalee. And good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining us on your lunch hour. I'm just going to take a moment to share the document that you should also probably see in the chat. And if you can go ahead and open it on your end, that would be great so that you can actively engage with us over the next hour. All right, so hopefully you're seeing my screen. I'm going to enlarge it just a little bit so everybody can see it. And there we go. So thank you for joining us for the follow-up to the program evaluation webinar that was on Monday. And now we're doing the peer learning circle, which is really kind of synthesizing all that we learned on Monday from Lydia Jones and Carla Slovchek, and we're so happy that they're here with us today as well. But also just to really kind of find out what's going on at your site and what program evaluation looks like as part of your programming. So if you have not joined a PLC before, we're going to be using the document that was shared in the chat as our guide for the day, and really hoping that you will interact both in writing and verbally as we move through the next hour. So in the area that says welcome and introductions, it asks you to please share in the adjacent notes column your name, where you work, your role, and most important probably, one question you hope to explore today. So there's something that brought you here today, and maybe it was a question that's been kind of nagging at you. I encourage you to put it out there and see, what wisdom can be shared from your colleagues over the next hour. So if you can just take a minute, please, to complete that request in the notes. Nice to see so many familiar faces here today. So as you are filling out the information in the notes column, I am going to move on to the next section, and then we'll come back and see who's in the room. But I'll, if you can just keep half an ear to me, I just wanted to go over what the PLC is. It's a lightly facilitated, time-limited discussion structured around a set of questions on, in this case, program evaluation. So we're really coming together to share our experiences, our lessons, our successes, our challenges, and really learning from each other in this professional network. Going over to the notes column, a guiding principle of the PLCs is that the wisdom is in the room, right? We are, there is not any one of us that is the expert. And so we really want to just find out, learn from one another and feel safe and free to do that. So I too am not an expert on program evaluation. I have been an administrator at an agency working with program evaluation. So I have my own experiences, but again, I'm not the expert. We are all experts today. So we're looking forward to the robust conversations that we'll have over the next hour. So before beginning the discussion, we're going to review the questions that are below. We'll take a few minutes for you to type responses to the questions in the right-hand box on the notes page. We'll discuss the questions that seem to have the highest interest first. So if you have a lot of notes that are going into one box more than another, we'll probably focus our conversation there rather than going sequentially through the questions. And at the end, we'll just share some takeaways and next steps. And that's where we're going. So I'm going to go back up and see who's here with us today and what questions might have arisen. So I see Anna from Mount SAC. Welcome, Anna. Rebecca, and Rebecca has a question, or she's a statement more. I'm somewhat new in this position, so I'm looking forward to learning from you all. Well, Rebecca, you are absolutely in the right place if you're doing any sort of data and evaluation and program evaluation. Michelle, welcome. Strategies for tracking transitions is what you're interested in. Yulene, good to see you, and she's still working on her questions. But what are some ways that we can encourage participatory engagement in program evaluation from consortium members? Okay, so looking at it from a consortium level. And what questions should we ask to get them interested? And then Latoya, nice to see you. How to track transition. Okay, so we've had a couple asking about transition. And Angela, welcome. Thank you for being with us today. And more may join the conversation. And if you do have questions, you're welcome to just add them here at some point. We will come back to some of these questions that you have. Prior to today's meeting, we had asked if people wanted to submit questions ahead of time, and those are the questions that we're going to begin with below. So I would like you to, I can read them, and then if you have some thoughts or how you address this in your agency, you're welcome to just start writing in the notes column on the right-hand side. But I'll just read down through the questions we'll discuss today quickly. How does your agency complete updates? What's the most challenging, confusing aspect of completing updates and outcomes tracking? How often does your agency complete updates and do post-testing? How does your agency track transitions? There's that question. What are EFLs and how are they earned? How does a student complete an EFL? What requirements are necessary for an agency to earn a WIOA 2 payment point for an EFL? How often does your agency import data if using a third-party vendor? How many people are importing data at your agency? What benchmarks in terms of both pre and post testing and instructional hours do you use locally to evaluate success? And the last question, for the 7 program areas where CAPE outcomes are reported, what are your thoughts on consortium members calculating and sharing outcomes, funding allocation and outcomes program hours for each of those 7 areas? And overall as an average in order to calculate member efficiency with their allocation as a key piece of determining member effectiveness. All right. So hopefully some of those questions kind of speak to you, and maybe you can take a moment or take about 5 minutes to reflect on them and add any notes or how you might respond to those questions. And I'll be quiet for about 5 minutes while you do that. Just a couple more minutes. Make sure that you also take some time to read what others are writing. Okay, let's jump into the questions. It looks like there's a couple of responses to what's the most challenging or confusing aspect of completing updates and outcomes tracking. And one of the responses were there are so many fields. What is necessary or most important to complete on the update? And then there's another response there too, all the data definitions, kind of keeping up with everything and making sure that you're staying current, right? So I'd like to invite either the folks that have commented here, or maybe you read something that resonates with you. Would anybody like to come off of mute and share your experiences?
I don't mind popping off of mute. I wrote the second one, which is our community has changed a lot over the years. And we have faculty turnover, staff turnover, admin turnover. And so making sure that we're constantly aware of our WIOA and CAPE data dictionaries. What are the changes? What are the updates that need to be made? And then making sure that we're in constant communication with all of our members so that we have a training program in place so that as we onboard new staff and faculty members, we have a awareness of, since it's the faculty who are filling out the update records, what everything means. Because as the first person commented, there are a lot of fields and there's a domino effect that happens when something is marked. And then that's reflected in what we end up reporting to the state. So making sure that we keep up in an efficient way is challenging.
Good. How do others keep up and manage all that change? Thank you, Lydia. Is everybody doing updates in this group? Maybe you could, maybe you could talk about how updates are impacting your program at all.
I don't do updates. I'm the data person, but when I talk to the teachers that do the updates, the one thing I do hear from them is that even with the data dictionary, it's so confusing and everybody understands things differently. So in our consortium, even at each district, everybody kind of follows it a little different. on what is required, what's not required, and how they understand it. So I think that that's the most difficult issue we have. So when we do data to compare district to district, it's never really apples to apples because we don't really see it the same way. Even if we read it together, even if we do it together, it's just so broad, I guess.
Mhm.
Renee,
That
can I-
is, yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh, yeah, go ahead.
So I hear what you're saying, because you've got many schools, agencies, and you said comparing apples and oranges but they're still fruit, right? One of the strategies our consortium uses, and it's been established for a while already, is aligning data reporting. And that's kind of what Monday's activity was about. So we used some resources that we have been relying on at the consortium to align how we're reporting and tracking outcomes. And yeah, everything changes. Some people interpret it differently. Others look at, the same piece of fruit and see something totally different. And, it's going back to the resources that are out there in the field. They're updated annually, and it's keeping an eye on them, but it's also using them and referencing them throughout the school year. And we found that really super helpful. So one of the things that we do with our data work group is every month, we're going to go to those resources. We're looking at them. We're all trying to assure that we're interpreting the information consistently the same way. And we found it helpful. It's not perfect. It's not a perfect system yet. There's always room for growth, but we are aligning our efforts, and it's been, it's been very helpful. And so some of the resources we use, again, we shared a couple. It's, you got to create something and put it out there and have our data managers try it and say, well, this works, this doesn't work, let's fix it. And it's getting input from them and working as a collective. That's how we're aligning those interpretations and reporting efforts. I hope that helps, Brenda.
Great, thank you, Carla. Carla, you mentioned, resources are updated every year. And I don't know that everybody on the call has the experience to know where to find those updates, or maybe what the best resource, how do you go about finding what updates are out there?
Gotta keep it's keeping our eye, on CASA's website, number one. That's my first go-to, the training and networking page on the website, the CDE website, the Cape TAP website, or Cape website. Those are the three that I focus on. EDD too. So hopefully if you have time if you're going to Summer Institute, I'll be presenting I'll be part of a panel sharing all of the Carrick resources. But what it is it's all the requirements, how they've changed, what's changed, the data dictionary. So we've amassed all of the resources that are available out there, and we created what we call the data binder. And it's just the binder here at Carrick. And it's got 10 tabs. It's got a lot of resources. It's a manual, think of it. And every year we're changing, throwing the old stuff out, bringing new stuff in, so that again, we're referencing the same information. So putting it in one place makes it easier for our consortium members, our administrators, our data managers to go to one location on the internet and find all of these resources by topic. If that, so we have a table of contents, and bing, 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 you go to where you want. And it's helpful. It's very helpful. It's all out there, and it's all very dispersed in different places, and you're not sure what to look for, what to access. But collating, and I got to give it, I can't take any credit for this, Bethany Eli, the previous coordinator, She started it, she got it together in 2019, and we're just continuing that practice and making changes and additions as new requirements come along, right? We get new requirements each year, things change, definitions change. So those are all things that we work on over the summer, so that come fall, we have this resource ready for our members.
Mhm. Good. So the first question or the first response was, that there are so many fields, and what is necessary, or at least most important, to fill in when doing an update, in reference to student record updates. But are there other types of updates, or is that what we're talking about, is the student updates? Anybody want to respond to that?
So my response was talking about the updates as well, because when we are talking about the either the WIOA data dictionary or the CAPE data dictionary, that one of the portions of it is in there speaks directly to the update records, and there are a lot of fields, and those definitions do shift a little bit, and understanding is clarified. This year they added attachment S for the service section, and so they are it is challenging to keep up with what is important and what isn't, what is required, what isn't. And so going back to something that Carla said, having something that is unified across a consortium is very helpful. That way people are on the same page, whether you're in this district or that district. It's very helpful. And then having it just at hand, I know for myself, I take that one particular, because it all comes together, your entry, your update, and your test on the CASAS website. It's one giant data dictionary. I pull out the center and I just have it highlighted and flagged, the areas that I know the faculty in my particular district are going to be asking about. And I pull that, I gut it essentially. And it's different in every region, it's different in every district. But yes, I know my comment was talking about student update records.
Mhm. Thank you,
If
Linda.
I could make one more comment, for example, at Carrick, our community college does not support non-credit classes. So what we've done with our update and outcomes resources is we have struck through, put a line through anything that's community college related as an outcome, because it confuses people when there's a lot of things. And man, if I see, skills progression, I'm going to think one thing, but it actually means community college, college development, career preparation. So in our case, we, again, to make it easier to interpret the information, what is not applicable to us as a consortium and as our members, we will strike it through. We'll leave it there so that it's visible, but strike it through. This does not apply to us. Please don't mark this, if that helps.
Yeah. Let's make this a conversation. Anybody else have any thoughts on this topic, on this particular question? Okay, let's go back up to the first question. How does your agency complete student updates? So one person said that they're completed every term by faculty in our third-party system and imported into TE. So maybe the person that wrote this, are you able to come off mute and talk about what that third-party system is, and how was it determined to have faculty as opposed to maybe data and accountability staff?
Sure, I'll come off mute.
Okay.
Yeah, so it was our admin decided that it was going to be faculty. They were not a tiny school, and our faculty know their students better than anybody in the office does. They are compensated for doing it. So there's that portion as well that's taken care of. And so whether they're teaching a nighttime class, whether they're teaching an afternoon class or a morning class, the faculty take care of the update records, and then they do have support. If they happen to be in the EL department, the nighttime people, faculty, I go over and help them. It's all the night faculty come together at the end of a term, and then I'm there to answer any of the questions that they might have, any changes that may have occurred. ASAP is known to change things midway through. TE is known to change things midway through. So, anything that may be a little bit different, they have someone there to support them. We have a set of instructions that is done by programs, so they have that as well. There's also a screencast. So depending on how the administrator prefers it and the PLCs for that program would like it, whether they want to meet in a group, whether they want to do it at home, whether they want to do it one-on-one. There's a lot of different options available depending on the program and depending on the administrator and the PLC of that program. So it's ESL happens to be our largest program, so that's why they've decided to keep as a group. And then they have the support of the data manager for them. And then it just gets, all that data is imported into TE. I go through every file and check for certain things like alternative K-12, that gets removed. When it comes to the SPS file, I look for specifically for things like retained, because that will impact our employment and earning survey, which I know is not on there, but I don't want to see that, and that we haven't been using for a couple years, so that gets removed. And then that way it
May I
just helps.
interrupt?
Yeah.
I'm sorry. What is SPS?
That's a student program status,
Thank you.
and that's tied into the update but it's broken apart in files. So other data managers who work with third-party systems will recognize there's, I believe it's 6 or 7 different file types. So it's part of the update record, but it's broken up by different file types. So yeah, and then that will have an impact on our employment and earning survey. So yeah, retained goes away.
Okay, and so you're having to choose between retained and left.
So
Am I correct
retained
about
and
that?
left, yeah. So retained and left, everything is controlled now by attendance. And if there isn't a solid reason to keep them as retained, which at this particular moment in time, there isn't in our agency. At our agency level, there isn't. So we're not using it. And then as for left, there still is a reason for exiting, but we're not using left because that's going to be, again, controlled by attendance. And then once the student has been gone for 90 calendar days, they're automatically going to be exited unless they have one of those 3 or 4 specific reasons for exiting.
All right, thank you.
And I'm sorry for that extra, way extra, too much information, but if there's other data managers, then they'll understand what I was talking about.
There's so much knowledge to be learned. Good. Any others?
There is a question that came through in the chat from Dr. Ollinger, and Lydia, this is to you. What consortium are you part of, and do you have a separate faculty for just CAP and or non-credit courses?
So I am tied to the Capitol, and I'm also part of the East Region Consortium down south. To answer your question.
And do you have a separate faculty for just CAPE and or non-credit courses?
So we have we are not, for East Region, I'm with Grossmont Adult, and we don't have any, it's adult school, so non-credit. We do have an articulation agreement with some of our community colleges in our consortium, so that's a whole other that's a whole other story. But then we also, of course, have lifelong education, which is not going to be brought into TOPS for Enterprise. Does that answer your question?
Within your consortium, within East Region,
Uh-huh.
is there is there non-credit programming within the consortium? Maybe just not within Grossmont?
I want to say yes, but
You work with a community college that
yeah. Oh,
has,
yes, yes, yes.
okay. Yeah, so working with a community college where you would have some courses that students are going to that they're not earning credits for, so far as you know.
As far as I know, yes.
Okay. And then Carla shared earlier that in CARIC, or the Capital Adult Ed Regional Consortium, they are also linked to Los Rios Community College, but the Los Rios Community College does not offer any non-credit. So, so that is a, you're both different from each other in that way. Good. Okay. Anybody else? Any questions? Any thoughts? All right, let's go to the next question. How often does your agency complete updates and do post-testing? Anybody want to jump on with that one? Lydia, you want to go ahead?
Yeah, this one was mine. So our EL, we are a WIOA 2 agency, so of course we have a testing calendar, which falls in line with our local assessment policy. And the testing calendar for EL, we start in the end of July because we follow the proxy. So our first post test is the end of July, and then we test total 5 times a year in our ESL program. And then our ABE ASC programs test when a student is ready to test after 70 to 100 hours of instruction. And then within CTE, we're expanding our IET program. So those are the students who test within our CTE program at this particular juncture. And that may change in the future, but that's where it is right now.
Good, thank you.
What's everybody else doing?
I know, I don't know. Everybody's having a really good lunch. Anybody out there that's kind of been a little quiet, you want to speak up and come off of mute at all? How your agency is completing updates, or how your consortium is working with updates? Maybe at the consortium level, there is no talk of updates. Is that a thing too?
I'll just put out there that I'm so new at what I'm doing. And at the agency where I spend most of my time, someone else is doing almost all of the data entry, but I'm supposed to be offering help in TOPS and NOVA to anyone who needs it in our consortium. And I'm just coming up to speed with it all myself. But I have one school that's been doing, they have 40 students, and they've just been doing very, very little official stuff. And I'm kind of getting the whole system started. So I have no idea the answer to most of these questions. I'm going to make it up for them, and it's already been made up by other people than me at the place where I work most. So I'm super interested in hearing what anybody has to say about their own experience.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And how are you getting your training, Rebecca?
I did all of the, online webinars that CAPE offers, and not all of them, obviously, but I got all my little qualifications that I needed. And I'm coming to Summer Institute, and I'm attending these calls, and I'm going to the convention in October. So, I'm working on it, but I would love to hear what everybody has to say.
Yeah, perfect. Good. What are others doing to kind of stay connected and to kind of learn about this? Do we have others who are newer on the call? I can hear a pin drop. That's okay. Thank you, Rebecca. I appreciate you sharing that information. And yeah, all of this, I remember when I first came into adult ed, and I won't tell you how long that's been, but it's been a while. It's just, it's very overwhelming at first, and especially when you hear all of the acronyms within the adult education community, and CASAS has their own language, and really each program area has their own language, and then to be responsible to turn around and support everyone with that is a challenge in itself. So good luck, and I'm glad that you're reaching out to Cape TAP and CASAS and any other, and us here as your colleagues in the field. So let's, I know there were a couple questions that we had when people came in about transitions. So we've got the question here, how does your agency track transitions? But I want to make sure I give, looking to, let me see. How do we track transitions? That's from Latoya. Strategies for tracking transitions, and is there a time frame of when a transition needs to take place? For instance, if a student graduates high school diploma in February but enters college in September, can we count that? What a great question, Shannon. Okay. And I'm going to say, I'm just going to put myself out there. And I, again, I'm not the expert, so all of you can tell me I'm right or wrong. I would say, yes, you can. You can say that you are going to transition to college. Right? High school enters college in September. What would the rest of you mark? Would you say yes, no, otherwise?
We kind of came up with a local policy because we didn't really know the answer.
Mm-hmm.
So we said if it's within like a year of the transition, we're going to count it, but I wanted to make sure, I wasn't doing anything inappropriate. But and then a piece of that is actually obtaining information that they did transfer, which we're working with our institutional researcher at the college to make sure we're tracking those students as they are transitioning. And we're doing that on our quarterly basis. Even though the college uses MIS, we've asked the researcher to go in and kind of line up with our quarter system in TOPS Pro. We have some local internal deadlines that we work within. So we're kind of following that same suit, and we're not a big consortium either. So I realize that, big consortiums might not be able to do something like that, but we're trying this out to see if we can gather more transitions, because we're really lacking in capturing it unless the student tells us that they are transitioning.
Right. And that's key, right? Yeah. Well, let's, Carla or Lydia, do you have experience with students
So I wanted
with this exact question?
Right. It's a great question, and one that we trying to tackle from various different points. But a student can have multiple updates. So, for instance, we've got, let's just take a scenario. ESL student, it goes from ESL to ASC, and that transition happens in January. Well, then you would track that. You would mark enrolled in secondary and create an update record for that student for that period of time right there. And then at the end of the year, the student, let's just say the student completes GED, right? You're going to track right there, you're going to track a secondary outcome for that. So that would be past GED or HiSET, whatever it was. And then let's just say the student says to you, I'm enrolling in college, for the fall. Well, then what you would do is you would mark transition to post-secondary or enrolled transition to credit, if that's where the student is going. And it would trigger a transition to post-secondary outcome as well. So there the students got two updates. The one that happened in January going from ESL to ASC. And then we've got the end of the year update where the student has passed all the GEDs or HiSET and is going now into community college to take a credit class. or enroll in a program, that would trigger, but you have to mark that on the update, right? It's not going to happen automatically. You have to mark transition to credit. There's also, and this is where it gets confusing, and it is confusing because there's no direct language that addresses this. There's another outcome called achieved post-secondary. And one of the educational outcomes on that or under that category is entered college, any college situation. So the same student could trigger a transition to post-secondary achieved and also trigger entered college on achieved post-secondary. So it depends what you want to mark, right? I would mark both those outcomes because that's what the resources tell us to do. But your consortium or your agency has to come to an agreement to do it that way, right? You have to agree, because then you've got the reason we kind of started to look into this was we were looking at an outcomes report and started noticing outcomes where there shouldn't be any outcomes and no outcomes where there should be. And that's what got this whole discussion where Lydia and I started working really diligently at trying to untangle what transitions are and post transitions are, and or post-secondary achieved is compared to this. So it's still, I mean, there's still some foggy stuff there, but we are pretty confident with what we would track in a situation like that. So yes, the student, we would count that as a transition to secondary. Lydia, do you have anything to add?
Well, yeah, and that's where one of the what is the word that I'm looking here for? One of the handouts from Monday that was so valuable, and I almost want to be like this one, is the color-coded chart that breaks everything down that CASAS has hidden away. that says that this is the labeling for other literacy gains, this is your secondary, this is your transition to post-secondary, and names it, and that Carrick has kind of improved upon to make it a little bit easier to break down what are our transition outcomes, what are our post-secondary outcomes, so that there's a visual that's clear that really makes it a lot easier to understand what all of these triggers are. And this goes back to Brenda's comment where on the update record, there are so many fields. And with those fields, there's so much to mark, and there are so many triggers that this chart, the outcome chart, is such a helpful tool to have, because then it links it to our outcomes and our summaries.
I think so we utilize that outcome chart religiously. So we use that a lot. But I think where we get the hang up is if students, unless they tell us that they are transitioning to the college, that's where we lose that transition a lot. And sometimes we find out months later, oh, they did go to college, but at the time when they stopped or finished their goal with us, they didn't know, maybe they didn't know they were going to college or anything like that. So that's why we are really connecting with our researcher to be like, okay, can we capture these students who maybe didn't know at the time or made a switch and decided to go to college right away, or not right away, excuse me. So I think that's where our hang up is, because we do a student survey every quarter on all our students for that reason. If they say that they're planning to go to college, that's where we capture the ones that tell us. But if they say no, but then decide later on, that's where we're like, dang,
Yeah.
we missed you. So that's where we kind of said with our researcher, we'll do a checkup on a quarterly basis on kind of those cohort of students. And then we kind of gave it a time frame of a year because we just didn't know if there was an official time frame to capture them. But that's what we're doing right now. And I'm, like I said, I'm kind of asking the question to make sure we're on the right track and we're not doing something inappropriate.
Sounds like you're on the right track to me.
Great practice. Yes, absolutely.
I know, Jason, you had your hand up. I wanted to give you an opportunity to talk if you had.
Yeah, about that question, I was, because here's the thing. It says like they graduate in February, right? So when's the end of that program year? It ends in June, or data is due July 15th. You don't find out until September, so you can't go back and update that update form. Data is already due at that point in time, right? So what you kind of have to do is you have to preempt it. If you're going to say like, okay, so we know this person might. Are you going to go ahead and just assume that they're going to? Are you going to go and mark them as transitioned, even though you can't officially say, yeah, they transitioned or not? Technically, I mean, I guess there is no real CASAS police out there. So if you want to preempt it, you can. But I mean, I don't know. That's kind of a difficult situation in terms of how it gets reflected on the AEP dashboard. If that's what we're going for, and we don't really care about what the CASAS outcome says, right? Then yeah, that's more likely because, theoretically speaking, when the AEP is put together, it takes the CASAS information and it'll take the MIS information from the following year, right? It's, since it's very lagging, it won't show up until like the March like not next year, but pretty much the year after that down the line. They're going to see that the student showed up in the CASAS form at the adult school, like in that program year, nothing reported in the adult school for the next program year. But once MIS rolls around, and that data is launched in, assuming that the person matches, right? Because, the way the data match is done, at least according to Wested, is they do a full name match. So first name, last name, date of birth, gender, right? Kind of thing going on. And if those match from both exactly the adult school and the MIS system, which may be shaky, right? Because like if you don't have like those like consistent names, like for example, someone goes by Joe in one place, but they like put down their official name in MIS as Joseph, right? That won't match, right? Stuff like that. So you've got all those different variables going on, and your data match is kind of like go everywhere in that sense. So I mean, I guess that's where your challenge kind of lies, right?
Totally agree, Jason, completely. And yeah, the lag between AEP and what we can generate out of TE, there's huge discrepancies. One thing I'll say though is that what it will do at the agency adult ed level is it lets you know how the agency is performing. How are we doing with our students? Are we getting students to even think about transitioning to college? And even if for whatever reason, the job or finances or medical didn't allow the student to go into college that previous term, we capture the information that the student completed X, Y, and Z and had planned and told us, okay, I'm enrolling in school. And the verification with AEP that comes a year later, well, it may match, it may not. But on one hand, it does give the agency some sort of global idea of how they're doing at the performance level. How are they doing in supporting students and providing them with the skills they need to be able to enroll or even consider enrolling in community college. So it may not generate a point or a percentage on AEP, but it is a reflection of what we're doing at the agency level, if that makes sense.
Looks like it does. Thank you. I just wanted to do we are coming up on the hour, but I did want to ask Latoya Brown or Michelle Steele or anyone else that mentioned transitions, any kind of lingering question that you wanted to get out there before we transition to the closing? And if you guys are paying attention to the chat, there's some stuff going on in the chat too. Shannon, I'm glad you were able to ask your question and get your answer. Okay. I'm not hearing any, so I want to just, we did not get through all our questions, but we had some really robust discussion. So I want to thank you for being so actively engaged in that. I want to scroll down to the bottom down here and to where it says closing and next steps. And if you could provide us some feedback with what was the most useful takeaway from this discussion? What questions do you still have for future exploration? And do you have any other questions for Cape TAP that we could assist you with? So if you can just take a few minutes to complete those 3 questions, please. And I want to put out there too, if it was kind of over your head today, or you weren't really, you weren't really sure what all this was, maybe you could indicate like maybe how could it have been different, or how could it have been something more of what you were hoping or looking for, if you can articulate that. I am seeing some comments about missing the part 1. If you do miss the part 1, you guys, there will be recordings available for you after they've been remediated. So we send them away for accessibility assistance, and then once they come back, we post them on our website. So you will have those to reference and learn from. Another resource that Carla was talking about.
And just to add to that, if you were registered but weren't able to attend, everyone who is registered for part 1 and part 2, once those materials become remediated and accessible, we'll also send you a direct message via the chat box.
Thank you, Mandalee.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so at this point, I just wanted to thank you, each of you, again, for making this a priority for your lunch hour today. And I want to also extend a thank you for being here twice with us this week, Carla and Lydia, and participating in this discussion we had today, and kind of being that much more aware of kind of some of the questions in the field that are coming from our CAPE partners. So any last words of wisdom or thoughts that anyone would like to share with the full group before we say goodbye?
Okay, hearing none. I'll go ahead and close this out. Renee, thank you so much for facilitating the PLC today. We really appreciate you also taking your time and spending it with us this afternoon. For those of you still with us, please take a note. Holly has dropped in some links for you. One of those is the evaluation link. Take a few moments to please fill that out. It really does help inform how we plan professional developments moving forward. Some additional fun links that are being dropped are also the registration for the Cape Summit. And then if you are considering presenting at the summit, and it will be in person this year, please take some time and fill out a proposal that will be closing on June 30th, as well as any model programs you'd like to highlight. So I think with that, I'm just going to thank everyone once again for being with us, and we will see you next time. Have a great afternoon.
Mandalay,
Thanks,
can I ask
Amy.
you a question about the summit?
Yes.
Are you guys like filling up really fast? I'm trying to work with our business office to make sure we get scheduled, but they have a little hang up, so I don't miss out.
Yeah, no, so as far as the attendee registration, you still have time. You still even have time even in the new fiscal year with the early bird special. However, the room block is filling up pretty fast. I think we just were sent a report. I want to say, and Holly, you can correct me if I'm wrong. I think we have about over half of the block has already been reserved.
Okay, so,
Yeah.
okay.
So you have some time, but I would, if you can get it done sooner than later, and it sounds like you're working on it, you should be good.
That is all correct. And Shannon, if your holdup, I'm going to go out on a limb that it may be similar to other people's holdups, which is a purchase order at the change of fiscal years. We are acknowledging we know that's an issue. So if you are paying by purchase order or check, you can go ahead and register and mark that. We're going to give a grace period, seeing as we are transitioning from 22-23 to 23-24, and we will not delete your registration at the 30-day mark like we originally said. We're building in a little bit of grace to receive purchase orders.
And that's for registration, but not the room.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
And as a note, Rebecca Nolan also popped in the chat. It doesn't cost any money to reserve the room. So it sounds like they're giving some grace there. So if that helps get you situated, and hopefully that's helpful for you. And then looks like Holly, you answered Jason's question. Are there any set number or ticks per consortium? And no, there are not, Jason.
Right. In the past, we used to do a set number of pins per consortium, but we have moved away from that, and it is it is open for all who would like to attend.
All right. Any other questions for the PLC or even for the summit? We're here and happy to answer. All right. Okay, everyone. Thank you very much. Have a wonderful rest of your afternoon, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.